You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello, and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, as always, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak and Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is week 14. Wow. Kyle, you know I'm going to say wow. Mr. Harris, what is good in Albuquerque tonight, sir?
All is quiet on the Albuquerque front. We're moving along nicely. The season is moving along. Somehow, I think we've played literally 75% of all the games, and the league continues to plow forward and navigate these tricky waters, whether Des Bryant likes it or not.
What a damn shame. I think a lot meant to, that game meant to him last night, and it was kind of odd how it worked out, but then Ian Rappaport kind of unfolded it.
In case you missed it, he was pulled off the field in warm-ups after a late COVID test positive, and was unhappy, vented on social media, which look, honestly, man, I don't do a lot of venting on social media, but were I to vent, that would be something to vent about. I mean, it's just a bad situation all the way around. Exciting ball game, kind of.
His venting was pretty fun, too. Like, at some point, it was just like, let's sit around and drink wine and, like, have a good time. He asked other people what they were drinking. Like, he seemed to not, like, get over it quickly, but, like, took it on the chin and just, like, moved on like an adult.
I was thinking about it last night. I'm just thinking, man, the immediate disappointment. It's his former team. He had a point to make, all these things. And, I thought, honestly, if that was as bad of a meltdown as you'll ever see from him, that's pretty damn impressive. And I think for the reason Kyle stated, just the sharing of wine glass photos was over the top. It was a great time. So exciting game. Great to see Lamar Jackson, back in the mix and running like he always does. Great running game for the Baltimore Ravens, almost 300 yards rushing against the Cowboys defense that has no interest in stopping anybody. That Baltimore backfield is going to be a tough nut to crack, continue to be going forward, and we'll talk about that. But there's some other news items we want to get to first, gentlemen, before we jump into your DFS picks, which I'm sure are crisp and ready to go. Hot takes from all involved, but we'll start out in Philadelphia where Jalen Hurts gets to start at quarterback this week. How bad does this hurt, Kyle?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, it hurts to see Carson Wentz just flop completely, but at this point Carson Wentz has played so poorly, and it's so much so that he has made bad mistakes. Like, I think physically, like, he still can throw nice deep balls, he can break the pocket and scramble, he can throw on the run. It's his decision making. He looks very Jameis Winston-esque in that way, but just a lot of the lowlights of Jameis Winston that he just makes errant throws. He throws into, like, way too tight of coverage. He doesn't see linebackers waiting across the middle. It's just been a bevy of awful bad mistakes. It's been these back-breaking sacks even. Those kill drives. Those sacks, those interceptions are all killing drives. And I think regardless of if Jalen Hurts is immensely better as a passer, I think the floor on Jalen Hurts is that he doesn't go out and throw 2 to 3 interceptions and get sacked 5+ times. I think the floor for the entire offense is better if the ceiling probably is mostly unchanged.
It seems like a big part of the problem to me, Justin, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong or acknowledge my wisdom. Wentz is holding on the ball too long, and that's the reason for a number of the snaps. Does this give you, and if you agree with that, does this give you hope that at least Hurts can turn that part of things around?
Yeah, he's more dynamic, right? I mean, I think that a couple years ago, Carson Wentz was on his way to an MVP season. Things were different in Philadelphia. The offensive line was as good as it gets. It was a different coaching staff as far as I can remember, or maybe it wasn't. But it didn't seem too long ago that Carson Wentz was going to make that leap. And the offense around him is not great. And the coaching staff, quite frankly, with Doug Peterson it's poor. So this is the only. So
let's just stop there and say this is a coaching staff that won a Super Bowl not long ago with some of the same talent. I mean, is it really poor coaching or is it just poor execution on Wentz's part?
Well, again, and you are the biggest proponent of offensive lines matter, right? And this offensive line is not great. And historically, it's been damn good. I mean, top 5 as far as I can go back. You have a washed-up Alshon Jeffrey. It hasn't worked out with some of these younger wide receivers. You have guys learning. Zach Ertz is a shell of himself. You're leaning on a tight end. They're not getting the ball to Miles Sanders was hurt. So they're in disarray. We know that Jalen Hurts is more dynamic. He can run. And look, I tweeted out something earlier. He could be the next Russell Wilson. The expectations weren't high for Russell Wilson. I think the only way for a guy like to see what you drafted in Jalen Hurts is to throw him right into the flames against the New Orleans Saints, who have been spectacular on defense, and see what he's made. See what he is made of at this point. And because we've seen it. I mean, Justin Herbert's one of these guys most recently. Tyrod Taylor's never going to play quarterback for the Chargers again. The opportunity presented itself for Justin Herbert. Yeah, he got shut down by the Pats last weekend, but he's going to be the Chargers quarterback for the foreseeable future. The opportunity was there. He seized the moment, and that's that. And I think that, in today's game, when we saw Lamar Jackson the other night do his thing, I think he's still got a lot of growing to do as well. Let's see what Jalen Hurts can do. Again, he doesn't have murderer's row as far as weaponry around him, but there are some nice pieces, and he's going to be a work in progress. It'll be interesting to see against the Saints.
The difference between this and Los Angeles, of course, is Carson Wentz is owed has a $128 million contract. Yeah. Tyrod Taylor does not. So that complicates matters greatly for them, but it's not something they'll figure out this week. This week they'll enjoy Jalen Hurts going up against one of the better defenses in the NFL, and so will we. We hope Christian McCaffrey does the same this week, returning from the bye. The shoulder injury was apparently in the rearview mirror, we thought. He was limited today, but it wasn't just a shoulder. It was a thigh, something he tweaked last week and is an issue again this week. Now we have Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore both on the COVID list. Don't know if they actually have tested positive or if they were just close contacts. If just close contacts, maybe we can get them back in time for this game. But levels of disappointment at Christian McCaffrey, Kyle, and we know the answer here. The answer is Mike Davis, but man, what a bummer of a season.
Yeah, to be clear, none of us are disappointed in Christian McCaffrey. We're disappointed that he has been so, we're disappointed sharing it with him. We're both, crying at the same pain, probably not to the extent that he is. But also, luckily for him, he can, he can never play football again, and his life is completely set. Yes. I'm sure he doesn't want that to be the case. Right. But luckily, luckily he signed, even though next year he will probably, if he maintains his health, be the best fantasy back and the best statistical back in the league once again. Thankfully, he did sign this mega deal coming into this year, so we have no worries about his long-term financial situation. I'm very saddened. I like watching Christian McCaffrey play, and even if we see him play this week, if he doesn't have a good performance, we're going to look back and say, well, maybe he should have waited one more week to come back.
Right.
And if he does have a good performance, that would be awesome. If they don't have these receivers, I don't see how they don't probably run a lot of 2 running back sets, get Christian McCaffrey simply lining up in the slot, maybe even out wide, and using Mike Davis as the actual running back. And obviously Robbie Anderson would just be in the spot of all spots. It would be a 2-man, maybe arguably 3-man offense with Mike Davis. Maybe we see a tight end get involved, but that honestly seems unlikely at this point. I don't care about Christian McCaffrey's health. If he plays and they don't have those receivers, it will be a crazy game.
Justin, Josh Jacobs, once again, doesn't look good for him. John Gruden said early in the week that he was not optimistic about his return from the ankle injury that kept him out against the Jets. Now, as fantasy managers, we often see these new pieces come into play and we chase after them aggressively. There are times when they disappoint us. I'm looking at you, Brian Hill. I see you too, Devontae Booker. How are you handling it this time? Is it just a matter of we should just have more realistic expectations, or should we expect everyone to be Ty Johnson?
Well, it's interesting because Derek Carr lit it up last week, so it really didn't matter what Devontae Booker did. His ownership was through the roof. It felt like a trap. He's never been that guy. Wasn't that guy in Denver that could really carry the bulk. But interestingly enough, week 10 against the Broncos, he ate and so did Josh Jacobs. So I think we got something in our head said, wow, this guy can really carry the bulk, but he's never been that guy. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But with Derek Carr, our guy who we haven't thrown the towel in over the years, is playing out of his mind. And our boy Darren Waller is too. So on a run-oriented offense, it's going to be interesting to see them not have Josh Jacobs because he's obviously relied upon heavily. As far as any confidence in a Devontae Booker? No. And the Brian Hills of the world? No. We've seen it time and time again. Although Mike Davis was that guy a few weeks ago, and he's had his moments. They used him like a little bit like Christian McCaffrey, but it's disappointing to say the least. But with that being said, you got to be happy the way the Raiders are playing. All in all, I think that John Gruden has done phenomenal, and so is our GM friend that had his jaw dropped when they moved up to draft Trubisky in Chicago, Mayock.
Yeah, speaking of moving up, we'll see the Deshaun Watson revenge game, so to speak, going back to the Chicago team that drafted Trubisky over him.
Nice.
Kyle, Washington football team likely without Antonio Gibson this week. Man, Peyton Barber is uninspiring a player, as you'll find, yet opportunity knocks. Would you answer that door?
I will not let Peyton Barber into my fantasy household. I would look at him and no one's home. Please go away. Now, if J.D. McKissic knocks, I'm saying, you hanging up with them, and you showing up with any of them PPR points, J.D. McKissic? I'll let you in the door.
Oh yeah.
I think they'll use him basically as an extension of the run game, and maybe literally in the run game. They're underdogs to still a solid, if definitely regressed defense in San Francisco this week. So that makes the between the tackles role already unappealing. And then you tell me it's Peyton Barber. I have no interest in him. J.D. McKissic, though, he gets a ton of work as a pass catcher. And now Antonio Gibson, who was in some games pushing him for that role, unlikely to play, obviously. So I think we can give him a safe PPR floor of like 5 to 6 catches, honestly. And the upside is literally double-digit targets, which he's done like 3 or 4 times in the past 6 weeks.
Danny Dimes, Justin, looks like he could return this week. The Giants' offense, though, beyond him, I mean, there are some pieces there that they have to build on. Do you think Jones would make a substantial difference working alongside Wayne Gallman and with this receiving core given the matchup?
I think we all want to see Danny Dimes, right? Especially you. A lot of moving pieces on offense. I mean, there's really no stability, but it's a nice story to see without Saquon Barkley, who we all wanted to see play, just like McCaffrey. The NFC East is open, and right now it's theirs. So I think the hope is that Daniel Dimes plays because despite the win in Seattle, the offense is grim. Yeah, Wayne Gallman is a jag in my opinion. He's just a guy. You're not going to in a fantasy sense, though, he's felt as safe can be. The upside is limited, but he's not going to hurt you at this point in time. As far as the wide receiving cast, Slayton has not showed up like we thought he was this season. I think the most stability has come from Evan Ingram, and that's been iffy at best.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. So it's going to be a tough slog. I was very hopeful for Mr. Daniel Jones. I am less so now, obviously. A few other items. DeAndre Swift could return this week, limited to open the week. Kenny Galladay seems unlikely to. Based on the start of the week, he did not practice. James Conner back off the COVID list. He'll return. And boy, what'd they average? A yard and a half a carry against the football team. They could use all the help they could get. They could also be helpful if they start catching some of those passes. Deontay Johnson there, he run. That would be great. And I like Mike Tomlin. If they don't catch him, we'll find him and place him with people who do. Look at him go. He's such a Tomlin. All right, you guys, let's get into DFS plays. We'll start with you, Kyle. Quarterbacks of interest.
Yeah, quarterback, I think Patrick Mahomes is always a guy you can pay up for, and because there aren't any glaring values on the slate, he's going to come in reasonably owned. I think there are some slates where we get a lot of value, and every single high-priced quarterback ends up being 8 to 15+%. I don't think that's going to be the case this week. I think we're going to see modest, if not, still be top 5, if not, top 3 or number 1 ownership. But in the context of this slate, that isn't 15 to 20% right now, at least as it looks so far. We can always get breaking news, but as of Wednesday night, it seems like it's difficult to play a Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill stack when you're balancing that with, do I want to fade Christian McCaffrey? Do I want to fade Dalvin Cook? I'm of the opinion that I'm looking to play the best offense with the best quarterback and the best receiver in the NFL, if not, the second or third best receiver. So I'm fine paying up for him and finding value elsewhere. But my favorite play by far is Tom Brady. I get that he hasn't looked great at points this year, but the last time we saw him, I believe it was that Chiefs game where he topped 300 yards through multiple touchdowns. I wouldn't even say he looked perfect in that game, but simply it doesn't matter. Vegas has his team total at, I believe, 29 points. They face a terrible Minnesota defense that should just be absolutely great to throw against. It seems like all the pieces are aligning for him to have an absolutely blow-up spot. The team total is great. The game total is among the 3 highest on the main slate. it seems like the game of the week to me in terms of price, ownership, and obviously the ceiling of the actual game environment. Then on the other side, as an underdog, Kirk Cousins is actually interesting. When his team is favored by a lot, I get concerned that they will get up, run heavy, and it won't be a fun game for 20 attempt Kirk Cousins. That doesn't appear to be the case this week, with them being pretty significant underdogs right now. So for that reason, I'm fine with just playing, a single stack of either Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen, play it with Kirk Cousins, and then run it back with someone on the other side. It's the game of the week for me. There's not really any reason to move off of it. My only other one is Justin Herbert versus a terrible Atlanta defense. The game total is at 49.5, I believe, and I don't think we're going to get crazy ownership on Justin Herbert, surprisingly. Right now, it looks like people are just going to gravitate towards different expensive receiver quarterback stacks. I think Keenan Allen is playing like West Coast Michael Thomas, and Justin Herbert is playing like one of the best rookies we've seen this year. I know last week it certainly didn't work out. That was truly, I can't believe they still have the same head coach they entered the week with. That is just mind-boggling that you could get embarrassed that bad, and Anthony Lynn still
And
show
in
up
addition, he's now also the special teams coach. Congratulations to you, Anthony Lynn.
He got a promotion from that game. That's awesome.
We'll get a promotion. What 2020's been quite the year.
Yeah, it really has been. But the coaching thing doesn't matter. Anthony Lynn's been the coach all year, and other than one game, it hasn't really manifested in Justin Herbert not balling out. So I'm going to go back to that well, and that's the bulk of my quarterback ownership.
All right, and I like that Patriots Vikings choices. Those are my choices as well. Justin, your choices include?
Yeah, obviously Patrick Mahomes is in play every week. I've said time and time again, Miami's a tough place to play. That secondary, the whole defense, in fact, has been spectacular with Brian Flores. I will probably have a tiny bit of exposure just because he's Patrick Mahomes, but this is a spot for Russell Wilson. A tune-up game. He's come back to earth the last month or so, but his ceiling is as high as anybody. And when you get the Jets in Seattle, I know there's no fans there, which stinks. It's a tough place to play. They're going to be the Jets are traveling. They are absolutely atrocious. You saw what Derek Carr did at the buzzer last week, which is hysterical as well. I think there's a great spot for Russell Wilson to just do his thing. So I'm paying up. That's exactly where I'm going. I'm with Kyle as far as Tom Brady. When he's faced pressure, he's been a hot mess. This is not the front seven we've seen from the Vikings over the past couple seasons. But if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, I am going to apply pressure to Tom Brady. Chris Godwin's status is up in the air right now. I think there's something to look at, but dollar for dollar, it's going to be Brady and it's going to be Justin Herbert. Kyle's right. This Falcons team is absolutely atrocious at home. Bill Belichick, I knew he was going to have a game plan for Justin Herbert. I told my people this and we used him anyways and it did not work out. But we're going to be just fine. I think this is a great spot for Justin Herbert to kind of, get up. This is what happens. You're a rookie in the NFL, bumps, bruises. This is exactly what I'm talking about when you play a guy like Jalen Hurts, throw him into the flame. These things are going to happen. And this is something that he needed to happen to him in regards to his development as an NFL quarterback. So give me Justin Herbert. No shortage of talent around him. When you talk about Austin Eckler, you talk about Keenan Allen, you talk about Mike Williams, and the pieces are there for Justin Herbert to succeed this week. So I'm going to have a lot of Justin Herbert. In terms of paying down, don't laugh. I'm probably going to use Andy Dalton. We watched him the other night against Baltimore, in Baltimore, and he looked comfortable. It's an atrocious Cowboys football team, top to bottom, both sides, but the talent around him on offense is probably as good as it gets. Tonight, it's going to be Russell Wilson. It's going to be Andy Dalton. And there are some options in between.
Yeah, I want to say I like that Dalton play, but watching him play against the Ravens, he looked like he could game manage his way to some degree of success.
Yep.
And if CeeDee Lamb had caught that Hail Mary, we might be having a whole different conversation about Andy Dalton. Right? All right, running backs.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not going to use Dalvin Cook at 9,400. If there's one thing that the Tampa Bay Bucks have done over the last couple of years, that's plug the run. So at 9,400, he's got to get us 35. I'm not going there. I don't think it's wise for Christian McCaffrey to play from an investment standpoint in terms of the organization. He's a competitor for numerous reasons. I don't want Christian McCaffrey to pay up to play. But if he does, you have to look his way all the time. I think that for me, it's going to be Aaron Jones. I mean, he absolutely destroyed the Lions week 2. He almost dropped a 50-burger against them, in fact, on 18 carries, $168, 2 touchdowns, was involved in the passing game. The thing about Jones is there is a committee there, but he is efficient when he gets the football. So dollar for dollar, I think it's Aaron Jones tonight as far as who I'm going to be playing at running back and paying up for. Kyle mentioned J.D. McKissick, 4,900. Antonio Gibson is out of the equation. This is a guy that's going to get 10 targets, I would think. And he was grinding a little bit in between the tackles the other night. It's also a good defense. I mean, they're limited with what they can do with Alex Smith. So for 4,900, it's going to be J.D. McKissick. I love DraftKings, the PPR site. We love that. That's where most of his volume is going to come from. In terms of Alvin Kamara, I keep going back to the Alvin Kamara well. It's going to be contingent on Drew Brees playing or not. But at 7,100, we've spent $9K on Alvin Kamara in the past. So 7,100 at Philly, I think he makes a fantastic tournament play. Obviously, he is still the number one back there. It seems like the foot injury has subsided a little bit, and his usage in the passing game. The last guy I will mention is Austin Eckler. I mean, I love Justin Herbert. I'm going to go right back to Eckler. Dud out of Eckler last week. Dud out of everybody from the Los Angeles Chargers. Go right back to Austin Eckler. Probably can expect 5, 6, 7, 8 catches from him. I think they're going to thrash the Atlanta Falcons, even though they're dogs tonight, which is kind of strange. They're home dogs against the Atlanta Falcons. So tonight it's Aaron Jones. I'm going to have Alvin Kamara in tournaments. Nobody's going to be on him. It's going to be Austin Eckler, and I'm going to have a boatload of J.D. McKissick.
Kyle, who will your boat be loaded with at running back?
So I think the interesting thing with this Jets-Seattle game is it's really going to be the test of if Russell Wilson is going to continue cooking. And not from a, is Russell Wilson good or bad perspective. We have a bevy of data to suggest he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It's simply that to start the year, it seemed like no matter the game script, no matter the scenario, Pete Carroll, Brian Schottenheimer were willing to let Russ cook. And by that, we just mean throw the ball with reckless abandon, throw it deep, throw on play action, do whatever he needed to do to get Russell Wilson that yardage. And not like that was, the strategy. It was that we thought at least that they recognized that throwing with Russell Wilson is vastly, leagues better than trying to run the ball. Even if you have a good running back, which they have a fine running back, but Chris Carson was also injured in the middle of the year. And they were letting Russ cook. Since week 7, they've come down. They opened the first 7 weeks as one of the most pass-heavy teams. In fact, the most pass-heavy team over expectation to adjust for their game script. Since then, they've come back down to outside the top 5. Is that trend going to continue, or does it flatline at still one of the more pass-heavy teams? I don't know, but at his price, Chris Carson at 6,900, I don't think is a bad play by any means, just outright given the volume he should see. And they have a massive implied team total north of, I believe, 28 points. They face the Jets, who do have a good run defense, but I'm looking at a Seattle implied team total, massive favorites, and it does set up for, regardless of if the Jets defense is good or not, which they are, like a top 5 run defense unit by Pro Football Focus. I'm not too concerned with that, given that Vegas thinks that Seattle can put up points, and they may be doing it on the ground now. I'm a little concerned with Russell Wilson, but on the other side, that manifests as modest excitement for Chris Carson, who, clearly should be operating as the team's bell cow. We saw 2 weeks ago, I believe he came back and kind of split work Carlos Hyde. That wasn't the case last week. He seems to be separating himself as the normal Chris Carson we expect. For that reason, at 6,900, I think he's a really interesting choice. I love Aaron Jones. That call, I won't talk about it too much, but just they have the highest implied team total of the slate. They are 7.5 point favorites, Green Bay is, over Detroit. This is a terrible Detroit defense on all fronts, run and pass. Aaron Jones at 7,600, I think, is just a better way on a points per dollar basis to tap into arguably the best offense of the week, at least. Lastly, Myles Gaskin. Salvon Ahmed didn't practice on Wednesday. It doesn't seem like he's awfully likely to play, and he's the only way I see Gaskin not dominating the backfield work once again. Went over 20 carries last week. Could have gotten to 100 yards potentially if he didn't have the ball knocked out from him on this beautiful long run at nearly the end of the game. I think the best thing about Gaskin is that he correlates well with if Miami manages to cover the spread, they're probably getting the opportunity to run the football a lot, and that also means Kansas City, without a doubt, is going to be one of the most pass-heavy teams on the slate. So I love the way that he correlates with my Patrick Mahomes lineups. Lastly, J.D. McKissic is really good. I think on the other end of the spectrum, Kenyon Drake, interestingly, at 5,500, his team's favored. I get like the Giants' defense is probably better than some people expect from a team with their record. I'm not too concerned. It's sort of the same thing with Chris Carson. Modest implied team total, favorites, and Kenyon Drake has 20-plus rush upside, even if his pass-catching role isn't going to be great. It's the opposite of J.D. McKissic. I'm fine with powering through only seeing 5 carries for McKissic because I know I'm going to get potentially 10 targets. I'm fine with powering through 2 to 3 targets for someone like Kenyon Drake because I believe he plays for one of the most run-heavy teams, and the quarterback now doesn't seem quite as apt to run, so that could open up more rushing potential for someone like Drake. At 5,500, I'm fine with 20 carries and 2 targets, and if the yardage hits, then I've made a lot of money on my Kenyon Drake call. So those are probably the guys. I'll throw one more out. Jonathan Taylor, sort of the same argument as Kenyon Drake. He's a favorite. The defense doesn't scare me. Ty Johnson got the better of them last week. Jonathan Taylor, given his prospect profile and the recent, emergence, he's kind of separated himself briefly. Hopefully it stays. He's separated himself from Jordan Wilkins. If that does hold at 5,800, he's in the same boat as Drake. He just has a ton of touch upside overall because his team is a favorite and they probably don't mind running the football. That I think at his price, you really have to get yourself into some Jonathan Taylor.
I could not agree more with that last one. All right, power your way into and through the wide receivers, Kyle.
Yeah, wide receiver is kind of obvious for me because I've talked about the quarterbacks I'm playing, so it's kind of, where I'm going with this. Playing a lot of Keenan Allen, playing a lot of Tyreek Hill. I know the price on Tyreek Hill is expensive, but I do think, we know for a fact that his ceiling is as high, if not higher, than Davante Adams. He's still cheaper, and I have him projected right now to be less owned. I think there's not a big difference between these two teams, between a Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes stack and Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers stack. But one of them looks like, on the Tyreek Hill side, to be significantly lower owned. So I like Tyreek Hill as the one really expensive guy I'm comfortable paying up for. Keenan Allen obviously pairs well with my Justin Herbert. I think, interestingly, I'm going to be playing – I don't have any strong stance on the Tampa Bay receivers. I don't know which one it's going to be. I'd be a liar if I came in here and told you I have the skeleton key to figure out which one. Because of that, I think few people are going to play any of them regardless. I guess we have to wait on the status of Chris Godwin. He got the pins pulled out of his hand earlier in the week and hasn't practiced since, I don't believe. But it would kind of make sense that he comes, he's been playing for weeks now, that he gets this, this small procedure to remove the pins. And they say, rest up, Chris Godwin. We know you're good. You don't need this week of practice. Few veterans at this point actually need the week of practice. So I think we'll still see him play. If we don't see him play, you just jam in Antonio Brown and Mike Evans. If not, I'm mixing in all three. And at their prices, I'm probably only playing one of in a single lineup, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, because they're both north of 6K. Antonio Brown, well below 6K. You can afford to get 18, 19 points from him if, Mike Evans takes a long ball or two. Those admittedly do come at the expense of, plays Antonio Brown could have scored on. At his price, you don't need to get every single touchdown. So I'm going to be doing a lot of double stacking of Tom Brady. Only one of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, because their prices will appear in those lineups. A lot of them will be paired with Antonio Brown. I think outside of that, just one more grimy play. Sammy Watkins. He's the number 2 receiver for the best quarterback in the league. And he actually draws a decent amount of targets when he's healthy. He's been averaging north of, I believe, 6 targets in the healthy games he's played. In the context of when your quarterback is Patrick freaking Mahomes, that is more than enough for me. So that's probably where I stand for the most part. I think outside of that, if Brashad Perriman ends up, I guess if Denzel Mims doesn't play because he's away for family reasons, personal issues, if he doesn't play, Brashad Perriman is kind of interesting as, just a correlation play with, if you like Russell Wilson, he makes sense with Russell Wilson. I'd probably use him with Chris Carson, though.
Yeah, that Mims thing seems like it'll be timing. If he returns in time to clear the COVID protocols, he'll likely play. If not, not so much. Justin, split out wide, line up in the slot, do however you like. Give me your wide receivers.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with Kyle on Tyreek Hill. I feel like every time you don't play him, he drops 40. There's just nothing you can do about Tyreek Hill. He blows by everybody. Again, I like this Dolphins secondary, so you look at it and you think that they would create some type of game plan for him, but it just doesn't matter when you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. They're being creative and getting him the ball. He just does whatever he wants. So Hill's probably where I'm going to go. It's going to be a lock button with Keenan Allen. Justin Herbert is growing on me by the minute, and I'm going to use a lot of Justin Herbert. I'm going to use Keenan Allen. We talk about him every week. He's had a couple duds, but 90 receptions already, 923 yards. This is a guy, even last week, and despite the duds, the volume is still there. Last 3 weeks, 19 targets, 10, 11. We know what we're getting when we pay for Keenan Allen. He's appropriately priced, and it's about time. It's only week 14. But even at 7,700, there's that much confidence for Keenan Allen. So I'm using Keenan Allen. I don't have a ton of interest in DeAndre Hopkins, but he makes a fine tournament play on the road against a pretty good Giants defense. James Bradbury might shadow him, so a little skepticism there. Again, a lot of these decisions are made, especially a wide receiver, in regards to ownership. 100% on board with Kyle in terms of that Bucs-Vikings game. And for me, it's probably going to be Justin Jefferson. Last week, Thielen was a little more, and now it's flip-flop, so you're spending a little more on Jefferson. That's a decision that is based on ownership as well. But if you're going to use Bucs, definitely have a run back with Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen in some game stacks there. I think we're due for a Tyler Lockett week. Am I 100% confident? No. But the rapport is still there. He's obviously not the alpha anymore. Obviously because DK Metcalf has just gone ham in 2020. But it's coming. And who better to do it against than the New York Jets, the lowly New York Jets at home in Seattle. So I will go to Lockett as well. It's going to be tough for me not to play Mike Thomas at 7,100. You talk about Kamara, you talk about Mike Thomas. I think it's easy. Mike Thomas was Devontae Adams last year, right? In terms of price and McCaffrey, and sometimes you're paying close to $10K for Michael Thomas. Mike Thomas came out last week against the Falcons, 22 DraftKings points, 11 targets, 9 receptions. I'm hoping it's Breeze, but even if it's not, I'll still go to Mike Thomas. 7,100 seems, he's discounted for me. Allen Robinson always is in play for me. He is chasing that proverbial carrot, wants to get paid like some of these other heavy hitters, and he deserves it. Quarterback play has been atrocious there, but Mitch loves him. Another guy, when you think about targets, he's just like Keenan Allen. He's going to get 10. He's going to get 12 targets. There's going to be weeks where he has 15. Very comfortable playing Allen Robinson against a Houston pass defense that is bottom 10 in my estimation. So I will go to Robinson sub 7K for certain. And my Bucs decision is going to be based on the health of Chris Godwin. If Chris Godwin does not play, I'm going to have a boatload of Mike Evans. The rapport with Tom Brady has been there since day one. I think Mike Evans is in a spot to get you 2025 DraftKings points, 6,600. Like, sign me up for certain. This Denver Broncos secondary with AJ Boye getting suspended, there's just nobody there. So I'm going to be taking a strong look. And with DJ Moore probably not playing, you're going to have to make a decision. I think in tournaments, Kyle's boy Robbie Anderson has been doing all right this year, but it's one of these weeks where you might take a look at Curtis Samuel. If he does play, I think you got to pick on that Broncos secondary. Agree with you guys on the Jets, especially if Mims does not play. I think Crowder is kind of coming to his own, 5,400. They're going to be playing catch up against the Seattle Seahawks. 5,400 for Jamison Crowder. We know what he does. He is that PPR machine. I'll probably go there as well. I did mention Andy Dalton, so it's only fair that I do mention some of his pass catchers, and CeeDee Lamb at 4,800. Like, absolutely slot guy. We know what he's going to do. The volume's there. If he caught that last night, was it last night? Yeah, it was last night, wasn't it? It was 2 nights ago. At any rate, week 13, CeeDee Lamb could have had 25 DraftKings points. Like him there, Gallup is sub 4K. You're paying a little bit up for Amari Cooper. Probably won't go there. Have Lamb, Gallup in a stack with a run back. T. Higgins' status is uncertain right now, and I'll run it back with Boyd. So it's the deepest position. It's a decision I make it's a position where I make my decisions on ownership. But tonight it is Keenan Allen. It is Justin Jefferson. It's Tyler Lockett and Mike Evans. And I know you want 3, but the Cowboys wide receivers with a Cincinnati Bengal run back.
Yeah, all 3 of the wide receivers.
Well, I'm probably going to go low there. Cooper's like 2K more than CeeDee Lamb. So it's probably going to be Lamb or Gallup. Michael Gallup's coming into his own.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. I thought he looked good.
Looks real good.
All right, tight ends then, Justin.
Well, how can you not play Travis Kelce? Looking at the numbers of all-time seasons by tight ends, and Travis Kelce had one of them, And he's coming up on it, boys. Not a Rob Gronkowski season yet, but there's 4 games to play. I mentioned the skepticism on Tyreek Hill. You don't have that same sense of like hesitancy when you talk about Travis Kelce. He's going to do his thing. I mean, this is Rob Gronkowski-esque, and he is every bit of it. So at 7,400, like, you pay up, don't screw around in the sea of mediocrity. When he's on the slate, you got to be careful in terms of fading him. You want to have exposure to him. If I'm not going to use Hill, I'm going to use Travis Kelce in probably every lineup and not fool around with the far inferior options outside of him. I think you got to take another look at Dallas Goedert as well. 4K against the Saints. He's back, guys. I mean, we've been talking about him for a couple of weeks. The targets are there. 7 more targets last week. Did not get in the end zone. He got into the end zone back-to-back weeks, the previous 2 weeks. But at 4K, like, give me Dallas Goedert. You envision Jalen Hurts using Goddard as that proverbial safety blanket. So I'll go there. And then a couple of lower guys. I mean, Lance Thomas had a coming out party the other day, which was
Logan?
nice to see. Sorry. Logan Thomas. I'm distracted right here. Logan Thomas came out. He was the guy all season. He was 3K, 3,500. He'd get you 5 receptions. Option B in the passing game outside of Terry McLaurin. But the volume was there. The touchdown came. So are you chasing points there? Not really, because you're probably going to use them anyway if you're paying down. Same game. Jordan Reed, narrative street there, playing against his former team. A little hesitant on Jordan Reed because Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are both back, so there's usage to go around there, but at his price point, and I do take narratives into account, I might have a little exposure. I don't love that game as a whole, but I get it. So it's going to be Travis Kelce, it's going to be Logan Thomas, it's going to be Dallas Goedert tonight.
All right, Kyle?
Yeah, I think in my Patrick Mahomes lineups, I'll be playing Kelce. Otherwise, I don't know, it mostly just correlates with what I'm doing. I'd be more inclined to fade Darren Waller than I would Travis Kelce because of their price only being $600 apart. You're getting similar target share volume from Kelce to Waller. Waller has a bit of a higher target share, but the Kelce targets come with the caveat that they're Patrick Mahomes targets. And Derek Carr has been good. He has been good. He ain't no Patrick Mahomes. So if I have to pick one, I'm paying up for Kelce. It's not that much more to pay up for him over Waller. I agree. Dallas Goedert is actually one of the very few tight ends who aren't, over 6K that I think are actually worth paying the volume for. Since his second week back from IR, his first week was a 1-target game, and I believe the weird game versus Dallas. Since the second week back, he has led the team in targets by a pretty significant margin, too. Like, he's operating as the number 1 receiver. He's doing the Zach Ertz things, where we saw Zach Ertz just play that sort of like slot, low ADOT, high volume role. He's doing that too, except he's probably more athletic than Zach Ertz has been in years. I think if you're actually looking for a good play that I'm just not going to say like, oh, well, play Hunter Henry if you're playing Justin Herbert, play Hayden Hurst if you're playing Matt Ryan. I don't think you have to play the quarterback or the opposing quarterback to play Dallas Goedert. I think he's one of the few good volume plays. Mike Gesicki at 4,500. I know last week it was good. It should be viewed with a bit of a caveat that Devontae Parker got ejected early in the second half, so I don't want to read too much into it. I would say more than anything, it was promising that the offense got going at the exact same time that Mike Gesicki got going. Not even that, he out-targeted Devontae Parker, because we can't really, project that going forward, but more so that I think the offense should try and focus more on Mike Gesicki given the massive amounts of production they got when going to him, and it's in a game environment that, Miami should be trailing. It looks like a very exciting game. He's only 4,500, and I'm looking at sub 5% ownership. I think just all of those factors make a ton of sense. Robert Tonyan, a little surprised right now his ownership isn't coming in as higher. If he does end up staying low owned, just any way I can tap into this awesome game environment, or at least awesome team total for the Green Bay Packers, I'm going to be doing it. I think arguably I might just set a play 1 Packer in every single lineup, and that'll get me into some Tonyan. I'm sure of it, and it'll get me into probably a little bit of Lazard as well. So I think maybe he just makes sense as if he scores 2 touchdowns, the Devontae Adams lineups probably die. So if you're playing him as a leverage point off of Adams, I think it makes a little bit of sense. I wouldn't go too crazy with it, but I don't mind him. Outside of that, like I said before, Hunter Henry, he correlates fairly well with my Justin Herbert lineups. I don't think I would use him anywhere outside of a double stack, though. The return of Austin Eckler has kind of pushed Hunter Henry, and even more so Mike Williams, to the fringes. I'm not sure that happens every single week, but I would be concerned about that unless I'm playing a lineup that specifically says Justin Herbert goes off, and I'm obviously playing Justin Herbert, but I do like him as a correlation play specifically.
All right, then give me the defenses that most appeal to you this week.
So at defense, I'm a little surprised that the Cowboys aren't just coming in as the massive chalk. They're not even the most popular defense of the main slate. They're 2,400, and they're facing Brandon freaking Allen. He's throwing interceptions at a 3% rate, which is well above average, or below average if you look at it from the negative point of view. He's taking sacks on over 1 out of every 10 dropbacks. The Cincinnati offense, their offensive line is terrible. Even when they had Joe Burrow, their offense had a pretty low floor, and now there is no ceiling. Like, I just don't see any reason to, at 2,400, to ever get away from the Cowboys. Like, sure, the Cowboys' defense, by any stretch of the imagination, is not very good. But I do think they've improved a little bit. They've gotten a little more healthy. We haven't seen them get quite as beat up, although Baltimore would tell you a little bit otherwise. But the first half of the year was still worse than the second half of the year so far for them. And they faced maybe the worst offense in the NFL, given who they're starting under center. I think the Seahawks at 3K, again, I don't really care about who plays on defense. I couldn't name you a ton of defensive players. But I can tell you who they're going to play, and it's going to be Sam Darnold. And maybe they don't play Sam Darnold for the full 4 quarters because he's that bad. But Sam Darnold has truly been up there with like Brandon Allen type of guys in terms of how inefficient he's been. He's bottom of the league in yards per attempt, adjusted yards per attempt. Still throws interceptions at a fairly high clip. Their team total is terrible. So I think those two teams, given their prices, are so easy to get to. Like, you should have to pay $4K to face off against the Jets, and you pay $1,000 less for that by playing the Seahawks. So those are probably my 2 favorites. I don't think I'm going to get too crazy with it. I mean, maybe the Eagles at 2,200 is another way to save money. Taysom Hill has been really good, but he also does limit. It seems like he limits the upside of his offense. So you're not playing for a high ceiling game, but at 2,200, you need a handful of points, and that's it. I think they can get it simply based on the fact that Taysom Hill doesn't play a high upside style. He plays a really good win football games and get out until Drew Brees comes back style. I just don't think it precludes me from getting 8 points from the Eagles.
All right, Justin, get a little crazier for us.
Couldn't disagree anymore. You're supposed to laugh. That Cowboys play, that Cowboys play, I mean, this is what I've been saying all year long. Like, and I was more comfortable doing it. Like, I'm not comfortable playing the Dallas Cowboys. Like, there's just there's no upside. I mean, where are we content at that price point? I mean, they're going to get you 5 points. You hope for 5, maybe 6. I just need a little more. So we differ certainly in regards to defense. Now, I'm not saying that I pay up every week, but I think this is a good week to pay up for the Saints against Jalen Hurts on the road. This is a team that is doing it at every level. I mean, as much as I've loved the Dolphins, I've loved the Saints as well. I mean, welcome to the NFL. Jalen Hurts, you're going to see Demario Davis, you're going to see Cam Jordan, you're going to see Marshawn Lattimore. This is what's going to happen, and they're going to create plays, and they're going to create turnovers. And that's at 3,800. I'm fine going there. You're not breaking the bank at 3,800. At 3,800, at 4, some of these defenses, there were points last year where the Pats were 4,600, 4,700, almost 5K, and that got a little ridiculous, but kind of comfortable here. And your defense, boys, this Washington football team creates a lot of plays as well. I mean, Nick Mullins, meet Chase Young. I think that this defense is as good as it gets, and that's the way it's built. So a lot of J.D. McKissick lineups correlated with the Washington football team defense, 2,800. They are creating plays. They are stingy. They're also on the road, which I don't love, but at 2,800, when you look at the numbers, there's upside there. They create plays, as opposed to when you look at teams like the Cowboys, there's just, it gets really gross. And when it gets gross, it gets scary. I got cute and I played the Falcons to save a couple bucks the other day. Did not work. Definitely not content with 3-4 points. I'm really aiming upwards around 10. I do love that Seattle call. I think Sam Darnold in another location that might work out. He's just kind of guilt by association there as far as being attached to the Jets. So tonight I'm paying up for the Saints. I'm going to have the Washington football team, and I'm with Kyle as far as the Seattle Seahawks defense.
And Justin Lonero was not talking about himself when he said gross, scary, and cute. I'm sorry. He's like one of those. Not all three. All right, let's wrap it up, boys. Great picks. I like them all. I am going to ponder them as I head into the weekend. Oh, let's get it out of here.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. For myself at Kyle Tweets here, for Bob at Football Die Hard, and for Justin at Justin Lonero. We'll catch you guys next week.